Lesley Patterson is my guest today. If you look up high achiever in a dictionary, I'm pretty sure you're going to see a picture of Lesley. She has been the XTERRA Triathlon World Champion and nominated for an Oscar. I think only her and Kobe Bryant have that shared accolade. Today we're going to delve into the concept of resistance as coined by the amazing author Steven Pressfield, and how this invisible force can be the biggest hurdle between us and our creative pursuits. Lesley's achieved significant success in basically anything she has put her mind to, and that's in no small part because of the strategies she uses to overcome resistance. Not everybody is ready to hear this conversation, but if you are ready, get ready to go deep. It's Lesley Patterson. Lesley, welcome to the Roadman Podcast.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here, a fellow Celt.
I feel like this is going to be a wild one.
Oh, it is, mate. I tell you, I've not even drunk yet, other than from me dodgy. It's a Club La Santa bottle. Have you ever been to Club La Santa?
I have, the windiest place on earth.
Mate, it's shocking, isn't it? But listen, they have the best theme tune ever. La Santa, La Santa, La Santa Sport. Come on now, join in.
I'm starting to get an insight into how you do so much in your day. Your energy levels aren't normal for this time of the evening.
Yeah, well, hey, listen, I'm in America, so it's my lunchtime, and I've just had lunch, and you know, I'm all guns a-blazing.
Do you miss home when you're away in America?
Oh yeah, mate. So my husband and I have lived in California for 22 years, but we go back to Scotland and England. I like twice a year. We've always tried to go home. All our family's at home, so we go home a bunch. But you know, California is still home too, right?
I used to race in the US, and I'd always get like, somebody would come up to me when they hear I'm Irish, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, I'm Irish too." And I'd be like, "Well, you don't sound Irish."
No, well, hey, listen, my favorite one is, "Oh my God, I just love Ireland." And I'm like, "So do I, but I'm Scottish."
So here's a funny one, actually. I was racing in Toronto with a friend of mine. I was on the American team. We were based out of Chicago, Stellis Oncology. And a friend of mine was racing for a team in Toronto, and I was racing north of Toronto. And it was a really bad day. It was one of those days, they call them Belgian toothpaste, where it's just muck all day in your face and your eyes. It was around 0 degrees. And we're in the changing rooms after, and we were great friends, and we were training partners as well. So, you know, the awkward silence is fine. We didn't need to fill that void in the training room after. We both knew it was a tough 200-kilometer day. And he just looked at me, and I said, "Rough one." And he just responded with a uniquely Dublin phrase that said, "Like a bag of carrots." Now, a bag of carrots, if you know a bag of carrots, it's sold in just dirt. So there's muck all over a bag of carrots. So that was his way of saying, yeah, it was a dirty one. But some Canadian kind of bystanders heard the two of us in this short little exchange. And he's like, "Sorry to interrupt, guys. Are you guys speaking Gaelic?"
Oh.
We're like, "No, we're speaking English."
Oh my God. I actually, when we moved here, I needed a translator. I'm not joking. It was a nightmare. I worked because I studied, you know, theatre in my undergraduate and graduate. So I did my graduate studies in California at San Diego State University studying theatre. And I could only, because of my visa, I could only work on campus. So my first job was working in the theatre department, like in the box office, you know, selling tickets. Yeah. I would sell tickets to, you know, at the box office. You know, they would always end up in the wrong show because they wouldn't understand a word I was saying.
But it is difficult at the start. I don't think anyone that's not Irish or Scottish or possibly Welsh that hasn't lived in America appreciates it, because you try and make, our culture is a lot of built on one-liners. So you try say something that's reactionary one-liner in response to someone's statement, and then they go, "Pardon?" And then you repeat it again, and they go, "Excuse me?" And then you're like, it's gone. The moment's gone. I can't explain it a third time. Just forget about it.
Oh yeah, I would get so frustrated. But it's funny, people are always like, "Oh, you haven't lost your accent. Like, how come you've not lost your accent?" I'm like, I don't really know how people lose their accents. Like, it's a choice. I mean, it's definitely like my words are rounded, but it lets me get away with bloody murder by having an accent, you know? I could totally get laid all the time if I wasn't married.
I'm fascinated about your career because most people can excel in just one thing. And I suppose it's the nature of high performance, isn't it? High performance, I always say it happens in the shadows. High performance maybe isn't something for most people to aspire to, because there's nothing balanced about high performance. High performance is, I remember having a Canadian girlfriend and going to the cinema eating spinach with her because I was so worried about my weight that I brought bags of spinach to the cinema. Like, that's a visual that gives you an insight into high performance. It's not something you should be looking towards, but you managed to be high performance in multiple areas, in screenwriting and triathlon. So I want to dig into that a little bit, because if we take just triathlon for a moment, high performance as an endurance athlete, I always think we cast votes, like James Clear talks about, cast votes for the type of identity we want. So you cast all these votes and you begin to see yourself as an athlete. And then for half of the day, you're switching over and you're seeing yourself as a screenwriter. Like, how is this possible? How is this sort of like dichotomy possible to carry on both of them? Do you think if you weren't a screenwriter, you would be a better triathlete, or if you weren't a triathlete, you would have been a better screenwriter?
No fucking way. Yeah, no way. It's so interesting because, as I grew up in the ranks in triathlon in the UK, I was in the high performance, right? And that was always a big thing. Like, you need to just focus on one thing. But honestly, having both of those things has made me better at both of those things, because you'd be surprised about how much overlap there is. So, for example, by developing creativity through, writing, I was also an actor. I also was a dancer. What it does is it makes you think kind of outside the box. That's the very nature of creativity. It develops certain skills in your brain. And when you take that to sport, what it does is, if you really are truly going to rise to the top, you have to think outside the box about how to get the best out of yourself, how to maneuver around different situations that are going on, like how not to just kind of follow in line with what everyone has done in the past. Otherwise, and essentially that's what I did at the start of my career when I was younger. I followed that path. I was told that you need to do this, this, and this, and if you're not good enough, you'll never be a world champion. But I felt in my heart that I had like a lot of piss and vinegar. I had something to give, and when I didn't fit the mold, when I wasn't going up that step ladder, I found myself a cargo net. And I'm like, well, I can still get to the top, just in a different way. So I think it's more about how it's developed different parts of my brain. Also as well, right? It's like when you're being creative, people always think that it comes out of nowhere, but it doesn't. There's a strategy, there's a craft. So the discipline that's come out of sport in terms of really breaking things down into pieces, understanding that jigsaw of like how your body works, how your mind works, how to put those pieces together to build into this peak and be successful, helps you put structure to something that seems to have no structure. And the beauty of art truly is making something very complex seem simple.
Yeah, there is something in that.
So,
like when I look at athletes, I'm often kind of confused as to why more athletes don't excel. But I know some people make careers where they're like good commentators and stuff, but I mean, why they don't excel, like move to a different discipline totally, or move to a different industry totally and dominate it, because there's so many things we learn as an athlete that at the time I don't think we realize that these are valuable skills in the marketplace. Like, you look at even goal setting, how an athlete approaches goal setting. Like, if you go into any of these kind of, highbrow corporate days now, they're talking about goal setting, and they're breaking down into quarters. They're breaking quarters down into monthly targets. Athletes do this at a very basic level. Even your worst athlete breaks their week down into their day, and they know exactly what they're doing today and how that's calibrated towards weekly targets, monthly targets, season targets, 5-year plans. Like, that's just one area I think that athletes are super in tune. But also, like, engineering your environments. You think about when you start training, you figure out very soon, these training partners aren't very good for me. I need to find a different group of training partners. And you engineer that environment for yourself. But
check this out, though. I think a lot of athletes that get to the top are part of a system. and they have the talent, and they're just molded through a system, and they listen to their coach and they do what their coach says, and they keep moving forward. The truly top great ones have done something unique and different. They've taken ownership over where they want to go and how they want to get there. So, and that's either because they're so supremely good, or they've become so supremely good by doing that. So I think a lot of top athletes that do follow the mold in a way don't have that entrepreneurial spirit to understand that they have skills or a skill set that could be applied somewhere else. Also, as well, when you think about like what either draws an athlete into a sport or makes them good, is often that sort of myopic view, that sort of insular sort of approach, quite selfish approach, maybe not outward. So therefore, when they finish, they don't maybe have the personality to kind of push beyond into the business space. Yeah. That's kind of how I've seen it. Because it's great
examples, especially your part of the world. I'm talking Scotland, not the US. Like, from my mind, Graham Aubrey is one of the most talented entrepreneur / athletes of our lifetime, at least. Yeah. And he's faded basically into obscurity from what I can see.
Yep. Well, look at his mental health issues, right? And I think that a lot of, especially endurance sport, comes with mental health issues, because the types of personalities that get in it often have mental health issues or trauma or something. And then what they're doing creates behaviors that kind of foster that side of their personality. So then again, they're kind of like, they've done this one thing for so much of their lives, and then they sort of finish it and they're kind of fucked. They don't have anywhere to go. Or I've got OCD, obsessive compulsive. The reason I am still functioning is because I have my art. It balances me out. Otherwise I get really obsessive compulsive, and it's addictive. Sport at this level is addictive. So it's like the very skills that have gotten you to be good are also the ones that can break you down.
Do you think it's the sport that breaks us down, or do you think the type of athletes that are drawn towards endurance sport self-select and are quite broken people to begin with?
Yeah, both. I think it does both, right? So even if it's a broken person that gets into it and it sort of satisfies this need, it tempers this anxiety or neuroticism, it also builds it too. So it makes it worse.
It can become destructive. Like, I had Yanni Brakovic, who was a World Tour cyclist. He won a stage at the Criterium, the Dauphiné, on the lead-up races to the Tour de France. And one of the prominent riders of that generation. He came through Lance Armstrong's team, Radio Shack, at the time. And he was on the podcast talking about how his life was utterly ruined because of cycling. It was an addiction. It was like a runaway train through every single area of his life, through his kids, his relationship. Nothing mattered, only trying to figure out how he could squeeze an extra 0.5% out of his performance. How do you put guardrails around that high performance to allow you to excel in screenwriting?
I think it's that's a really good question. I think that I'm a very emotional person, and I've always been scared of my emotions because I was brought up in a family where, and especially in Scotland, right, well, don't be too emotional, that whole stiff upper lip kind of bullshit. So I was always drawn to that side of art to bring out that emotion and kind of investigate who I was and to really feel. And then sport and endurance sport almost does the opposite. It kind of numbs you because you're always either too tired to feel anything, too busy to feel anything. And so like one always helped the other, right? So in that regard, whenever I feel myself going off the rails in sport, like I try and kind of cultivate something new on the art side, to kind of just to kind of, I don't even like the word balance because that's not what it is. It's like just to kind of fulfill that part of my soul.
It's more of a counterbalance than a balance, is it?
Yeah, counterbalance. Yeah, definitely. And I'm the intellectual curiosity of storytelling and the impacts of it and what you're investigating, what you're researching. Like, what do you want to say? Like, I always feel like I've been, and this sounds kind of naff, but put here to do something. And like, I don't know what that is. And I'm sort of like one of those people that believes that just kind of keep following that path, right? Keep taking the next step because it's meant to be in some way, even if it's fucking shitty. Like, something good is going to come from that. You're going to figure out a new path that you never could have anticipated. And if you kind of like give way to that in a way, or manifest in a way, like, fuck, I mean, it took us 16 years to get All Quiet off the ground. I manifested that every single day I was out training. I dreamt of it, I thought of it, I imagined it all the time. So there's something to be said for that level of energy, both in your cells and in the universe, you know, not in some sort of woo-woo sense, but there's a lot of new science to support, you know, the power of the mind, right, over at a cellular level.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in this. Have you heard of this idea of reticular activation system? You know what this is?
No, do you know what? I think I might have heard that, but tell me. I'm fascinated.
So, reticular activation system, it's really easy to explain. If you look around the room now and look for anything that's blue around your room, just like throw your eye around, anything is blue.
Yep.
And then now I ask you to recall anything that's red. You won't remember anything that's red around the room. You'll only remember what's blue. So we figure out, we're bombarded with so many messages each day in terms of visual messages, audio messages, that our brain has to create a filtration system to figure out what's important to let in. So when we tell our brain, okay, this screenplay is important, now we start to notice the red around the room. Now we start to notice, okay, the screenplay is important to me. Let that through the filtration system. And I actually think that that's where it all starts. Like you touched on it. You need to start with that vision. You need to start with understanding, in my view, what's important to let in. And then you can start saying yes to stuff. Then you can start showing up and doing the work. But if you just start showing up and aimlessly doing the work and saying yes to stuff, I've done that in the past without a vision. And I just got dragged in 100 different directions. And I ended up setting up stupid business after stupid business, thinking one of them would eventually make me happy and would be this panacea that would make everything in my life all right. But I just got more and more miserable.
Right. And I think that, like, what are you driven by? You know, finding your why or success. And that's a slippery slope, isn't it? Because a lot of people are driven to the outward success rather than the joy and fulfillment of the process of what they're doing. And, you know, people always wonder how I've managed to sort of stay in the sport so long, or why I managed to keep going and All Quiet. Because I love the craft. My why was really strong for both of those things. And so when you see the success pay off because you stayed true to something, because your why was so strong, that therefore means when you're attached to something else, you know it's for the right reason if you really feel that why.
When you say your why is so strong, when I try and, you know, get a little bit woohoo on that and unpack it, it's like there's two versions of the why. There's the internal and the external. Like if I think about why I started cycling, I tell everybody I started cycling because, I wanted to get professional contracts and I wanted to make a career of it. I wanted to represent the national team and win races abroad. That's the external story. That's the one I tell people. But the internal story, being my real story, is actually way more interesting. I started cycling because my dad lost his toe when he was in his 30s and he put on loads of weight, like 20 plus stone. And so I grew up as a kid seeing all the stuff that my dad couldn't do with me and my sister that other fathers could do. And so I made a promise to myself at some point that my life was never going to be limited by health, that obesity was never going to be part of my story. And that's my inner story that's much more powerful for me. Do you have that when you say why? Do you have internal versus external motivations?
Definitely. So my internal motivation for sport is I have this real primal sense about sort of both control over my body and how it feels in space and in land. I grew up running over the mountains of Scotland, and like I have this connection to the land, a really primal sense, like an animalistic feeling. I can't explain it. It's just like this feeling. And then also as well, like I had an eating disorder when I was younger. I had really bad acne. And I think that like to feel like I could control my body gave me some sense of stability through a period of my life where there was no control whatsoever. So that would be the internal one. And then the external one is, you know, to the underdog rising above all the naysayers to achieve. and then inspiring people that they can keep fighting against their inner demons to find that success. So I think that would be my sports side. And then on my art side, I think the internal thing is like a deep connection to the world and to people, because when you're collaborating, like there's this just absolute beauty in a connection, emotionally and physically. And you know, when you're creating a world and a story, it's just like magic. That's what it is. It's magic when you come up with these ideas and you're like, fucking A. And then the external side of that is to tell stories that mean something, that have an impact, that can change lives. Because I know when I was watching movies and television when I was younger, it changed my fucking life. Like, you could watch something and it could seriously change the direction that you would go in. Or it could comfort you, or it could excite you, or it could drive you, or, you know, it just could, like, the really good stuff could have a massive impact.
There's no one from the late 80s or 90s that didn't watch Rocky IV and start doing press ups in their bedroom secretly.
I've secretly always wanted to be a fighter, but I'm like 5 foot nothing and like, you know, 100-pound ringing wet. So, I mean, I don't know what class that would give me.
But both of yours are storytelling. Like, you're, one sense, you're writing a story like in a physical sense on pen to paper, but you're also just writing a story as well with the way you're living your life. Someone asked me recently on a podcast about the best advice that I've gotten on the podcast, and it was this idea of, well, you're the author of your life. Start writing your story right now, and the story starts with maybe the hero's not in a good spot. Maybe the hero's unemployed. Totally. Maybe the hero's overweight. Maybe the hero's unhappy. He's in a shit relationship. Right. He's in a shit job. Now, what's the story arc you want for this hero? And live your life like you are the hero in that story. I was like,
that is so such good perfect. Advice. Such good advice. And to be honest, I've always felt that way. I've always imagined myself kind of observationally so, like looking outside as though I am that character. And imagining it. So when I'm having a bad time or a down time, it's like, yeah, you're part of a film, you're part of a narrative, you know. Yeah, and I love that. And you know, in our book, so my husband's a sports psychologist by training, and we wrote a book together called The Brave Athlete, Calm the F Down and Rise to the Occasion. And it's kind of like this brain mental model, and gets into why we have thoughts and feelings that we don't like, and answers all these questions. And it's a book for athletes, but ultimately loads of business people, actors, high performance people use it too. And one of the little kind of tools that we use in there is an alter ego. So, you know, and that's kind of almost what you're saying. You become this alter ego that you create to kind of help you get through. You become this hero, you put on your cape, and, you know, you become that person you want to be, rather than, you know, who maybe you think you've been in the past.
Roadman, I know how serious you take your goal setting, whether they're fitness or life-related goals. If you're looking for a powerful ally to support you on this journey, look no further than Huel. Huel has become my secret weapon for when I don't have time to prepare a balanced meal. It ensures I get the nutrition I need without sacrificing time or taste. Plus, it stops me from reaching for that takeaway menu. I always throw a bottle into my backpack when I'm heading into the city to work, and it stops me eating junk convenience foods, snacking on croissants and bars of chocolate, because I know they don't support my training goals. It's a handy, nutritious meal on the go, and it's got over 22 grams of protein. Huel is perfect for athletes that don't have time to cook or prepare food before a training session. It's convenient, nutritious fuel at your fingertips, ensuring you hit your daily fueling needs for that session. Huel Ready to Drink has 26 essential vitamins and minerals in every single bottle. You're getting a whopping 175 health benefits. Plus, it's made from natural ingredients like tapioca, sunflower seed, coconut, and more. The best part? It's the flavours. There's 8 crazy, beautiful flavours. Iced coffee is what's in my backpack right at the moment. You can get Huel directly to your home. All you got to do is head on over to the Huel website, huel.com/roadman. Do you create observational space for yourself to make these sort of to just observe how you're living your life and say, okay, well, it's actually not going the direction I want. The story arc isn't as interesting this way. It'd be more interesting if I went a different direction. One author I spoke to had this idea of a general's tent, that a general in the evening observes the battle, and he's less concerned with the minutiae of individual fights, like how's it going on the west flank. He wants to zoom out more and observe the whole battlefield and see how everything's going. So he had this like evening practice of, he called it the general's tent, of observing how everything's going from a bird's eye view. Do you create space like that for yourself?
Very much so, and especially now as I get older and I'm dealing with a lot of pretty intense stuff right now, it makes you very self-aware of what your purpose is, who you are as a person, who do you want to be, what do you like, what don't you like, what's your impact in the world. So that's kind of come with maturity. It's also come with, and this is another big thing with sport and endurance sport. I was spending so much time of my life tired so that I didn't have to face those bigger existential questions, because it's difficult. It's hard. And if you have fear about delving into who you really are and who you want to be, you could just run away.
That's a big one, the tired, because I spoke to Fred Wright about this. He's the British champion at the moment, riding for Bahrain. And I asked him a question like, what's your threshold? And I wasn't talking about that from what's your watts threshold, your functional threshold, heart rate. What's your threshold for the amount of training you can do in a day before your creativity and your productivity just goes to zero? For me, if I ride any more than 2.5, 3 hours at an upper limit, I really notice a drop in my creativity. Do you have...
I'm pretty, it depends on what I've got going on in my life. If something really exciting is happening and things are going really well, like my threshold to be able to handle more is greater. And I think that that's what's really fascinating about a part of your brain. I'm not sure if anyone has spoken about this before. It's called your anterior cingulate cortex. And it sits just behind, it just sits behind your eyes. So we call it the ACC, and what it does is it processes emotional and physical pain. And so it's almost like checks in a bank, right? So if you have a lot of emotional checks, then your physical checks are kind of slightly used up as well. It's like if you have a big argument or lots of shit going on, like getting your heart rate up on the bike is fucking brutal, and vice versa. If you're totally pummeled physically, dealing with anything emotionally is tough. So I think there is actually some kind of balance. So if you feel like you're getting checks added because life is really good and you've got lots of really exciting things going on, I tend to be able to push more, and then vice versa. But I'm quite resilient in that regard. I mean, I was at my height doing 6, 7, 8 hours of training a day. That was pretty intense, running a coaching business, dealing with sponsors, doing stuff in film as well. But then I crash and burn, right? So I tend to just like take it to the limit and then fucking fall apart.
And if you're structuring your day, is there a creative period? I know Stephen Pressfield talks about this. Creativity shows up every morning at 9 o'clock for him as soon as he clocks in. I love that idea. And one of the things he talks about, which is a great comparison between athletes and creatives, is it's that mindset shift, isn't it, from amateur to pro? Because when you're an amateur athlete, if it's raining, I'm not training today. If I didn't sleep well, I'm not training today. If you're a pro athlete, you get out and you your training. You have good days, you have bad days, you have days with a headache, you have days with an injury. Honestly, if you only train the days where you felt good, you would almost never train. But that same shift can be applied then to creatives. The idea of, I'm doing a book. Well, show up every day and write your book. You're going to write shit someday, you're going to write good some days. Yeah,
and that's harder for me because I'm so used to pushing myself physically and pushing through that. But pushing mentally can be tough because I'm still learning to do that more, because to be honest, I've only been kind of full-time in film for not that long, right? But I tend to break up my day, and I tend to sort of, when I wake up first thing, quite often I'll be creative and, at least for kind of 30 minutes be thinking and talking and doing things that are, maybe it's about a story, maybe it's sending emails, maybe it's just ideas. Then I go off and I train for say 2 to 3 hours, and I tend to break that training up So I get an hour to myself, which is like whatever I want to do. Is it interval training? Is it out with a group ride? And then I'll spend, 1 to 2 hours either listening to an audiobook, watching content, working on a script. So I'm always trying to sort of engage my brain while I'm training. Then I come home and I answer emails and I sort my shit out. And then I have another creative period, kind of late morning, and then through to, I would have said, like mid to late afternoon. And then I go into more functional stuff as well later on at night, because we know that ACC, for example, it wears out. So it gets worn out by the end of the day. So that's why you have more motivation in the morning often and less at night. But interestingly, they did this study about this ACC, and it actually grows and gets more dense the more trauma that you've dealt with. That's kind of the sort of neuroplasticity aspect of resilience.
So what's the implication of it being more dense?
It can cope with more in the future.
Okay. So it's just like a muscle, you're building it.
Yeah, exactly. So what was really good about that as an athlete, when Simon, my husband, told me this from a science perspective, I was like, fuck, even when I have a bad day, that means it's a good day, because I'm building my muscle in my brain. Do you know what I mean? So then all of a sudden, everything was good. Everything had some kind of positive impact.
Yeah, I've this, I don't know if it's an irrational fear or not, but I never miss a training session. I kind of have this, some people subscribe to this idea of multiverse theory, where we're living many different versions of our own life. But I often have this idea that if I miss one session, I'm going to be transported to 55, 56-year-old guy who's sitting at a bar with a beer belly. I've, lost my relationships. I've lost all connection to sport, to creativity. And I'm just sitting there like talking to anyone who'll listen, just a sad, sorry case. And I like one training session missed. And that's me.
Bloody hell, mate. That's a window to your soul. Jiminy. Yeah.
Do you think you need training though?
I get like that. It's more just like that feeling of OCD, right? Which is pretty classic among athletes like ourselves. You know that feeling when you were young where you just had to touch the doorknob a bunch of times, or maybe you still feel like that.
You have to flick the light switch on and off 50 times, or your family die.
I did that when I was younger. Big time. So it's like, it's just that kind of same feeling. So sometimes I'll even force myself to, say I've got a 90-minute trainer workout, to stop at 1 hour and 29 minutes.
Yeah.
Just to really fuck with my brain. But I would say that that's where I'm struggling right now, is just to be okay with having a rest day, or the focus not be on training, because I'm still very much about planning for the next day of training. I mean, that's my mindset. Even when I'm on a film set, or even when I'm traveling for, it's like, okay, I've got to take my bike, I've got to take my trainer, and can we make that meeting? Can we push it an hour so I can get an extra hour in on my bike? And, here's all the food I'm going to take. And I still haven't gotten out of that mindset.
I put up a Strava file last year from a training ride, 199.8 kilometers. And I titled it, "Because when you're done, you're done." And people went mental in the comments, like, "Oh, would you not have just rolled the last 200 meters?"
Oh, mate, I know. But it's good. It's good for you, though, to kind of push against that. But, OCD is partly anxiety. It's a coping mechanism dealing with anxiety. So, again, not entirely surprising.
So you don't really have, or do you have a goal now, or are you focused more on process with your triathlon?
Yeah, definitely. Focus on process, and, that's not to say I won't race, I just have a different feeling towards it now. I would have said, I kind of want to do some different stuff now, or race in different places, or destination races, but having said that, I said I wasn't going to race last year, then I did nationals, then I did worlds, and I absolutely loved it. My experience of the sport is very different now. It's about embracing the community, the people I train with, my buddies, all of that stuff. There's just absolute pure joy in that.
Do you remember Nike used to have a slogan before "Just Do It," and it was "There is no finish line"? I think it's such a brilliant slogan. It's so true for so many athletes.
There's not at all, and that's why I always I never get it when I meet athletes that were real top of their game, then they just fucking give it up and don't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm
I have a
like,
friend who finished the Vuelta a España for his last race as a pro cyclist after 20 years as a pro cyclist, flew home, and he left his bike in his bike bag for like 7 years.
wow.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, that's not so. That's not me. I mean, apart from anything else, you get used to your body feeling a certain way as well. I mean, most athletes have body dysmorphia, body image issues as a woman as well. Like I definitely do. So it's like I've dealt with that my whole life. So that's a huge component of it too.
I don't know how to characterize this, but we spoke briefly off air about this. I was thinking about my relationship with sport and why I need it now. There's a type of self-medication and balancing out my energy levels to it. But there's some sort of contrast piece that for me to experience good, I need to have some level of bad. For me to experience sun, I need to have some level of dark. And there's nothing I enjoy more than like a warm bowl of soup or chowder. Like I'm thinking last year, the best bowl of soup or chowder I had was I went bike packing. We had this day where the temperature unseasonably dropped down to like 2 degrees. It rained all day, really underdressed. With two friends, we were miserable, freezing, shivering. We got into this bar and there was an open fire, and I ordered a bowl of seafood chowder and some brown bread. Probably wasn't the best food from like a Michelin star point of view, but it's perspective and its context, and it was the best food I ever tasted. So it's like I needed one to experience the other, but I find that on a more micro level every day of the week. I need some sort of trauma to enjoy some other period.
You're speaking my language. I've been like that since I was really young, and I don't know if it's you just understand like part of it is kind of dopamine circuits and all that sort of stuff, and the desire for pleasure is actually does more for your dopamine, or the pursuit of pleasure does more for your dopamine than actually getting it. So maybe it's that constant pursuit of something through trauma that gives you more of the joy. It's pretty fascinating, but I'm exactly the same. Like unless I've suffered in a day, I don't feel like I've lived.
Have you ever gone bike packing?
I have a couple times. It's not my most favourite, to be honest. I love my home comforts, man. I love a good bed. I love like, I don't know. I kind of get irritated with all the crap. You know what I mean? I like to be nimble.
Yeah, one thing I can definitely hear that, and there's certain people that it's just not for, because there's a lot of hardship, and it's basically just this constant game of trying to figure out how to solve problems to move forward. But what I loved about it was, and I was reflecting on it, why I was so happy when I was bike packing. We're great friends, and we were over in Spain with beautiful weather and stuff. But I think it was the closed circle every day. Like we never get to the end. I'm reading a book at the moment called 4,000 Weeks, because 4,000 weeks is roughly how much we all have to live if we live to the average life expectancy of 80. And it's all about how we're so frenetic and how we're so frantic with to-do lists. Like the advent of technology, it doesn't calm us. Like we're exponentially more aggravated by waiting for 2 minutes for our soup to warm up in the microwave than we are waiting 2 hours for a chicken to cook. So we're so aggravated by this technology. I was thinking about bike packing in terms of a throwback to ancestral times, because we got up in the morning and we woke up as hunter-gatherers and we only had one thing to do: get to another destination and eat. And that's all bike packing is. So it's open loop, closed loop every single day. And there's something very rewarding about that.
Yeah, very simple, isn't it? Like it's not complicated. It's you've got one goal and, you're going to achieve that, or at least that when you do, there's so much satisfaction. And that's the thing, isn't it? Like there's so much kind of complex bullshit that we get pulled into in terms of what we feel we have to do, what we have to do, all of that, and you can just like go down this fucking spiral every day.
When you look at yourself now towards the end of your triathlon career, what's your self-identity at the moment?
Oof, wow. That's a big question for many other reasons, which I can divulge on this podcast. I would have said it and it still is. It's like a entrepreneurial filmmaker, screenwriter, producer is definitely where I'm at. But most recently, my husband was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Oh shit! Sorry.
And it's been a huge bummer, and that's taken our lives in this whole different direction. So my identity right now is a carer. I have to get my hero cape on every day and just like suck it up and make it happen. And I think that's why my sport is so important right now, because I'm so used to getting my hero cape on, and that like I get this identity through it, that like to this level. I mean, I hope other people never have to deal with it, but it's so intense that like, thank fuck I've had the training I've had. Otherwise, you know, I don't think my husband would still be here, and I don't think I'd be here. You know what I mean? Because it's just so hard. So yeah, that's kind of a long way about saying that it's changing, and I'm still trying to hold on to like all the amazing stuff that has happened and who I want to be. But like looking towards the future is always hard when you're dealing with such like traumatic stuff on a daily basis.
And it's actually a really nice place to leave the podcast, because we started out talking about the attributes we build as athletes that are transferable into other aspects of our life. And I think resilience is definitely one of those.
Oh, beyond. And, you know, and I think it's when you're a real top athlete, you're always finding a brighter side to your situation, because, you know, you get dropped off the back of the group. You don't make that time. You don't make that group, and that just keep pursuing past all of those obstacles, and that's what creates the resilience, and that's what I'm using in spades right now. That's the only thing that's keeping me going.
Well, I wish your husband speedy recovery, and you to increased and continued resilience on that journey, helping him out.
That's right, mate, and having a few hobnobs along the way.
Thanks, Lesley.
Hey, listen, are you finished? Because what's your favourite biscuit to have with a cup of tea? Is it a cherry bakewell, chocolate hobnob?
Do you know what? That's a big question. I haven't had one that big on the podcast before. Hobnob would be up there. It'd be top 5.
Hey, chocolate or non-chocolate?
No, it'd definitely be chocolate. It'd be some sort of Cadbury's, because a little tip the cap to Irish Cadbury's there. Some sort of Cadbury's cookie, I'd say.
Oh yeah, Cadbury's fingers, chocolate fingers.
Yeah, very good, very good. And the calories don't count if you're standing up. I'm reliably informed by a nutritionist I had on the podcast recently. You can eat as many biscuits you want if you're standing beside the kettle.
Perfect. Or if you've still got your chamois on.
That's true as well.
All right, mate. Good to chat.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And we're just getting started, so subscriptions really matter. Click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.